This vidcast has been made possible by Chris Snell Media and Sound Production. For bookings for voiceover work, on-camera, motivational speaking, and DJing at your next event, email info@chrissnell.co.za. To find out more about me, visit my website, chrissnell.co.za. Enjoy today's program. How do you do, folks? Welcome to Having a Cuppa, Chris's bedtime story. So it's the Having a Cuppa Extra segment. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, or for that fact, you've tuned in to our YouTube channel, you should be watching this. Hi, pleasure to have you join in on the fun. If you want to get in on the action of this show, please take a look at our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/havingacuppa. Please do support the podcast and as well help us with the production costs for this show by namely through advertising. You can even send a shout out to somebody or even have a Q&A with me. That's right, privately for 60 whole minutes. Our tiers are as little as $5 a pop, so through that you can get in on the action. Now for the feature segment, I have to admit something first. I tried recording this yesterday, and about halfway through the conversation, I realized that I allowed my emotions to get a hold of me, and I scrapped the recording altogether. And that is a sign of exactly I was headed in the right direction, but I need to come more from a sense of neutrality and thoroughness, surely, but without letting my emotions getting control of me. So this subject today is the alpha and the beta personality, and I should say this, irregardless of the outcome, alpha and beta female personalities is not restricted to gender. It's both genders, male and female, respectively. You see them everywhere, in especially the office, the workplace, and even more so in your personal circle. But for the latter, I'm sure there have been times where you weren't exactly aware of it, which, that's fine. It happens to all of us. It happens to the best of us. Why do we make mistakes? So we can learn. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off. So needless to say that it has been commonplace, now more than ever. We need to pay attention to this. We have many betas all over the show. As I mentioned, they come in both forms. Everyone in this walk of life, even in business and especially in the War of the Roses, is fair game. Now, what does that mean? If you are wrong, you are wrong. It doesn't mean just because you are weaker, or for that fact stronger, in your mind I should say, that you are protected. You're going to get taken out, especially and more so on social media. If you've got an opinion, keep it to yourself. If you've got a perception, be strong enough to share it, regardless of the outcome. But the irony is, people with an alpha personality, from my experience, are the ones who get bullied the most. Why? Because they're telling the uncomfortable truth, and people are inconvenienced to hear it. So they get called horrible names, they get called things like misogynist, chauvinist, or for that fact, womanizer. The list goes on and on. I don't pay attention to all of it, but there it is. But at the end of the day, it's so surprising to see that when something blows up in a beta's face, that all of a sudden they should be coddled like little children. They're like dogs with a hurt paw, needing nursing. And speaking from a personal perspective, I've had a little bit enough of that. It's time that we recognize these personality types, the betas especially, and call them out for what they are. And if the betas think that they are being judged, well, good on you. You've realized something. You've realized that you have committed an error in judgment and that you should improve yourself. The question is, are you man, or for that fact woman, enough to do it? Now, what are some of the character traits of a beta personality? Let me just get my notes here. The beta personality type are nominally pacifist to passive-aggressive. They don't like conflict, and especially in a work situation, as I have seen, if a misunderstanding, or for that fact, the butting of heads should occur, no, come now, let's not go there. You've heard that type of argument before, right? But at the same time, they are the ones who are easy to point the finger. And if you are watching this, I am actually pointing the finger at the camera for the purposes of illustration. But if you notice your index finger pointing outward, what is pointing inward, right? 3 fingers pointing back at you. Which leads to my second point. Beta personalities are candidates who often suffer from low self-esteem and depression. And as a result, they feel the need to bring other people down to make themselves feel good, which gives rise to narcissism. And because of that low self-esteem, betas pity themselves to the point of seeing themselves as a quote-unquote protected species. And I see this so much on social media. Look, I believe in freedom of speech, and I'd like to think that throughout my communications career that I've been an advocate for people to share their thoughts, but never once did I ever say you should become an advocate for free speech, or you should practice rather your free speech and not bear the brunt if you are being ostracized for making a foolish statement. We see a lot of that in social media, don't we? And I've said this so many times before to nobody's apparent open ears. Sorry, I'm drinking a lot of water today because it's humid outside. Even though I've got antiperspirant on, I'm sweating like there's no tomorrow. And I've said this many times to repeat myself to nobody's open ears, that if you don't have anything uplifting to say, keep quiet. Or should I put it in even more blunt talk? Shut your pie hole. You know why beta personalities feel the need to say something? Because they just want attention. I don't even think they themselves realize the impetus of the comments that they make. And so ultimately, of course, they will get upset, but then they realize afterwards in that small minutiae of a second that, oh dear, I did actually make a fool out of myself, but let's try and see if we can claw ourselves out of here. And then they actually just more and more dig even more deeper than shallow grave for themselves. But that's enough of the beta personality type. I have to say, I don't know how originally this would turn out to be, but throughout my adventures of life, I've noticed that the beta personality has been commonplace as either a manager or a director at a company. But they have no skill whatsoever and no inner working nor emotional control for that position. And that's why they have cronies. If you've ever been in the workplace for a given period of time, take a look around you. And if that person who happens to be an MD, a CEO, a director, a CFO, a COO, the kind of person who screams and shouts and who gets so angry that if they have to write a mail to every given person in the office, that first of all, they will use cuss words. Now, there's a difference between using cuss words and text messages if you want to illustrate brutal honesty, but you can literally within a fraction of a second come to the realization that if a person is consistently using every single curse word in a professional environment, which is extremely unprofessional, but secondly, to force their point down your throat, that is the signs of a coward and not a leader. To bring it more to a personal setting, if you are in a gathering among friends and you're having an innocent chat about life, love, and everything else, and there might be one or two actual fact who feel the need to divert the conversation into another direction just because they can't contribute, that is also a beta personality. I was a TV producer for a couple of months, and the tender that I was assigned was to create content for local schools here in the area where I resided. Now, I've been a communicator for as long as I can remember, and as far as I can recall, if I bring an idea across, why do I feel the need to express myself again just because that person doesn't have open ears. And I'll tell you why that person doesn't have open ears is because they're already dead set on a given idea and that no one is going to deter them differently. Okay, fine. But then why doesn't that person open their mouth in the first place before I even gave my idea? They will keep quiet until they find the gap to say, this is wrong, that is wrong. We were actually looking at it for, let me just repeat myself because my tongue got twisted there. We think that this idea should incorporate that, and that. Then I say, well, why didn't you open your mouth? Oh, how dare you speak to me like that? Look, I say again, man or a woman, in my eyes, you're not a protected species. So I'm not going to go easy on you if you're being wrong. I'm not going to bite your head off, but I am going to call you out. I hate that expression, I'm going to call you out. I'm just going to speak the uncomfortable truth. That's it. And that's what we need to do more in this life. But before I get into some examples, I would like to illustrate the alpha personality type. And if you are an alpha personality, you're an absolute legend in my eyes. Because the first point I want to highlight is they subject themselves to self-improvement. I mentioned earlier, speaking the unconditional truth, well, that is what an alpha personality does as well. In life, love, and war, even in politics, they speak the unconditional, uncontrollable, uncomfortable truth. Not this nonsense of, as long as I'm speaking my truth. There is no such thing as my truth, your truth. It's the individual truth, period. That is just how it is, and people who think different are morons. Alpha personalities choose who they spend their time with. They're good character studies. They read people in and out, and ultimately can suss out within a matter of 10 to 15 seconds if that person is actually of good moral fiber, or if that person is not meeting their standards. I was presented with an argument once, you should lower your standards, come down to their level because they can't keep up with you. Young as I was, I didn't realize actually what a big compliment that is. And if you're naive, and of course you don't want to come across as the thorn in the side, what do? You obviously acquiesce. But that's equally detrimental, isn't it? Because then you give people rite of passage to walk all over you. But then on the other side of the coin as well, this even extends to friendships because people don't change. Let me accentuate this in in capital letters, full stops, and with exclamation points. People don't change. Just over a longer period of time, their masks fall off. A beautiful quote that I learned from my old mentor when I was still working in radio. There can even come a time where you realize that this hearty friendship, this hearty relationship that you've had with any kind of person is no longer working for you. There's somehow a kink in the communication. There's no longer a cohesiveness in communication. Then unfortunately, it's time to call that friendship, that relationship to quits because there's no longer this thing of bringing standards down. It's because of the fact that we bring our standards down in this lifetime, that productivity is slow in the workplace, that there's this nonsense of chauvinism, misogyny, misandry, and it's because of the fact that we are not bringing our standards up in society today. Take that comment and do with it what you will. If you think I'm being obstinate, well, wonderful, then I've done something right. But if you think I'm actually onto something, I ask you, please, work on it. And then the final point of the alpha personality type, which no one wants to hear of my generation, but I'm going to say it as it is. Nobody owes an alpha nothing, and everything that we have as alphas we work for, because that welfare mentality is not an option. Now, if you have thought to yourself, and if you're especially listening from my home country, how can we consider, for example, the previous generation who fought in the war in Angola and people who are much older, how can we consider them alphas if they bully us as well? Remember, I want to reiterate, beta personalities can come in all shapes and forms. Gender, age, social standing, if you so please. It's just the way it is. I have to tell you that's why not only can't I communicate with someone effectively my own age, but secondly as well, I can't communicate with any person who is an idiot. And I have put people in their place who are 65 years old. In fact, I worked for one. In fact, he was the MD of the very first FM station I worked for. And I don't care, I'm talking about this. It's a free world. I'm not mentioning names or anything. But he wasn't a leader. In fact, he was, in the fullest sense of the word, a bully. Because how can you call yourself a leader if you consistently belittle people? I mean, when I was high on drugs a lot of times, he would make the obstinate remark to me and say, "Chris, you're a fat pig." And we had Steve Hoffmeyer visiting that day in the studio, the popular Afrikaans singer. I know. I'm not a big fan of the man either. But in any event, I just looked at him bluntly and I said, "No, it's not the truth. I've got what was the word I used? I've got a cooler. It provides shade in summer and warmth in winter." And something to that effect. But whatever I said proved witty enough that the MD just blushed because he had been put in his place. And the one day he actually hit me with his fist on the shoulder. And without even realizing it, I just brushed it off. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to pay you any attention. You're not worth my time. Until one given day, whenever I explain something to someone, I'm a very physical kind of person, organically so. So if I extemporate arms in the air. And then one day I was extemporating so loudly that I balled my hand into a fist, upward, boom. Not knowing that the MD was standing behind me, and I clocked him in the nose. 6 love, true story. Naturally, I felt horrible, but it did prove proved a big point. If you want to roll with the big dogs, don't piss like a puppy, and what you sow, you ultimately reap. And I've come to be more comfortable in my skin as a person. Just because I'm mentioning this stuff doesn't mean that I want to persistently show people out for mistakes or whatsoever. Remember, I'm like you. I'm a casual observer. An observer firstly, casual second. And I notice things around me. And I think sobriety does that for you. The blinkers get taken off and you become a whole lot more alive, awake. And that gets perceived as cynical. And that gets perceived as judgmental. No, I don't want that for anybody. In fact, I wouldn't even want it for my worst enemy. I want people to win. But sadly, we're swimming in a sea of losers. It's a fact. It's a fact. And that's why I'm doing this show. In fact, that's why I'm trying to use my gifts, because I want to help people. It's my natural gift. I want to see people win. But I'm not going to help people win on their standards. I've done the hard work. I continue to do the hard work. I continue to improve myself. I'm consistently a work in progress. And whether you want to know this or not, there's a lot of improvement that needs to be done. Does this mean that I am a self-help coach? Oh, please. Life is simple enough, to quote George Carlin. You get up, you go to work, you eat 3 meals, you have 1 good toilet visit, and then you go back to bed. What's the big mystery? But that being said, I've come to know a couple of people who call themselves coaches and whatnot, and I can tell in half a second when they're just being nothing shy of posers. But in the same sentence, when they don't get customers, the ones that they should be trying as their next client, they belittle the people who have turned them down because why? The people not buying their products are idiots. No, you are the idiot for not bettering your sales pitch. If you have a marketing background, consistently refine your technique. Make your unique selling point equally more unique. Add an extra edge onto it. Maybe then people will buy into your product if you're a quote-unquote coach. Pump out more content. Don't get people to do it for you. Open up your ears. Take in new advice. Don't continuously make the sentiment, even though you don't have to say it out loud, but don't make the sentiment, I am set in my ways, this is how I do things, and no one is going to tell me different. The only thing that will convince me of what you as a person will not convince me otherwise is what I know in my heart is true, that I have love and passion in my heart. I have conviction in my heart. And you're not going to convince me otherwise. If I say, for example, I am a recovering addict, I have alcoholism. Saya Nelson wrote this up on social media, so I'm borrowing from her. Saya, love you, sweetheart. It's alcoholism, not wasn't. And that's the kind of conviction I have. Who are you to tell me just because I'm not using anymore that I'm not an addict anymore? Have you actually worked your 12 steps properly? There you are. There you are. That consistently, what I have mentioned, is unfortunately the clash in which we find ourselves today, the clash of the titans. And I do admit that there have been times myself where I have felt the need to accentuate that point that I am right, that my point is valid of everything. Until I betrayed my cardinal rule, which is you don't have to convince anyone of anything. There's my side of the story, your side of the story, and then the gospel truth. And the work will speak for itself. More even bluntly put, or more politely I should say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And I'll give you a good example of this in a professional setting especially. The media in South Africa is convinced that just because you are a brand name and that you specialize in creating content, people know your business, that they will thrive on that alone, the business, the reputation of the business. But what they often tend to forget is that it's the workforce that help keep the brand alive. About a year or so ago, it will be a year ago, I was flipping through my social media to get my chronology right. I did a live broadcast of an award show that was hosted by a local community station in where I reside. I was called in late onto the project. We were a staff, to the best of my recollection, 8 as I recall. And there was a lot of logistical problems that came with that project. I mean, we had to do dry runs because some personnel had to go do other shoots that they had to wrap up with as well. Some of the performers that were performing at the award show couldn't pitch up for rehearsals, which to my mind is natural to happen because that's just the heart of logistics. But the fact of the matter is, a problem exists that you as a person can try and come up with a result of it. And I have to say, the team of 8 that we brainstormed. We all came up with ideas, which we presented to the body, and they liked it. So ultimately, we were there 4 days on site. It was a 380 seats theater, and we only had one live run the morning of the show, and we had to go live that evening. It was a 3-hour performance. And I was on the main camera of that broadcast, which was frightening in itself because even though I'd been working for the company around this time 3 months, and I had built up some skill behind the camera as an operator, I had never been main camera for a show before, which was frightening because if you have ever done it before, just to give you a rough idea, if you're looking at me now, I'm wearing cans. So you have your cans on and you've got this camera on a jib, which you are consistently moving according to the direction that you are being given through your cans by the person behind the monitor. And often those comments can come at rapid speed. So you have to think on your feet, you have to be patient, your eyes and your ears have to be wide open. It's a high volume of stress that's going through your system. But the case in point is, with the amount of preparation time that we had, we made the best of it. Took the ideas that we had discussed, and ultimately we drew in a viewership of more than 5,000 online viewers for that show. It was the biggest project that I'd ever done at that time. And just a couple of days ago, I happened to be on social media again, and the same award show that's going to be held this year is going to be at a small little community church just down the road. And I thought, what a downgrade. But that's exactly the point as to why I'm recording this show. If you don't take a step back and listen to the people who are knowledgeable and to the people who may have more experience and who are talking in your best interest, the project is ultimately going to fail. But there's a mentality in this society, this species, that if a view has to be contrasting in a personal setting, that you are a know-it-all. Well, if you want to be that nasty, well, yes, we do. That's why we specialize in what we specialize. So in that regard, if you want to go at it and do it yourself because you think you know better, please go right ahead. But the chances are going to be 9 ways to Sunday that you are going to fail. Why? Because your cocksuredness and headstrong mentality as a beta is what puts you in the position as to where you are today. And I'm sorry to say, and I mentioned this earlier, there appears to be this notion that the beta personality in a workplace setting somehow obtain that position, but they're not fit for it. And I'll tell you 2 other things. Cronyism and nepotism. Beta personalities don't want to lead, they want to control. Cronyism and nepotism. Through those 2 things solely is what they want to do. Because they have low self-esteem, they feel the need to operate the outcome of every given issue, which means do as I say, not what I do. That kind of control. Manipulation. And don't think for a moment that just because I'm identifying this stuff, that I have had to read this stuff up in order to create an episode like this. I've been in this situation hand over fist. I could sit here and name names as to how many times I've had to come into conflict with beta personalities, men and women who have such low self-esteem of themselves. And quite frankly, I can get away with it by calling them out by name. I can happily do that, but I'm not going to. Not because of the fact that I'm scared. I'm scared of nothing, save for the Almighty. But I've forgiven them and I've moved on. And that is the biggest difference between an alpha and a beta personality. A beta personality feels the need to hold on to hurt. And in their mind, you don't need to forgive. An alpha forgives, but frankly, they never forget. And that about wraps up this bedtime story for this week's episode. I'll put this up on YouTube for you to view. I hope that you've enjoyed yourself thoroughly. If you've got any questions that you would like me to answer in subsequent solo podcasts, please direct them to me at info@chrisnell.co.za. And if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, be kind, Subscribe to this channel. Be sure to check out any additional interviews that are going to be coming up soon. You never know what's going to happen next. Until you and I meet the next time, this has been Having a Cuppa Extra, Chris's Bedtime Stories, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.